This here is the oldest part of the cathedral, the choir. You see, it took a long time to build this church, 632 years. And the oldest part, that's where they began building in 1248, is right here. That's where they put the cornerstone. And it took a long time because out of many reasons. You see, in 1248, Cologne was very well off, biggest city of Northern Europe, firmly in the hands of the church. They had lots of money due to the trading here, and that's when the self-esteem of the citizens was so enormous that they believed we deserve the biggest church in the world here in Cologne. So quite optimistically, they began building this. They knew it would cost a lot of money, but it was believed that the trading on the river would provide a constant income and that they would be able to afford it. So after only 72 years, they had already completed this part, the choir. Ended up being bigger than most of the churches of the time, but there was still a lot of work still ahead of them. But after the choir was complete, the first catastrophe already approached Cologne, and that was in the year 1348, the Black Death, bubonic plague. This terrible disease killed almost a third of the European population. Here in Cologne as well, thousands of people died every day, and so people believed the end of the world had come. For a few years, nothing happened here. They didn't build anything. Only after the disease had passed, they were able to continue. And then they kept on building for longer than 100 years. The long nave began to grow, one of the spires was begun, foundations were completed, but then came the next catastrophe, for Cologne at least, and that was a special year. Might sound familiar, the year 1492, discovery of America. You see, of course, this was good for the world, new trading routes, new discoveries, a new world to discover. But for Cologne it was pretty bad because the trading on the rivers now was no longer important. Big business was now over the Atlantic, and if you wanted to take part in that big business, you needed a seaport, which unfortunately Cologne did not have. So Cologne was now bypassed by the big business of the world, showed on the budget of the cathedral as well, and so they had to continue at half pace, and that's what they did until the middle of the 16th century. And that's when the death blow to the cathedral was dealt out by a man called Martin Luther. You see, he was indirectly responsible for the fact that this church was not completed. Reformation deprived the Catholic Church of one of its most powerful financing instruments. You see, for centuries, the church had made a lot of money by forgiving sins in the exchange for the payment of money. That was something they called indulgence. Invented a lot later than the Bible. You won't find anything about that in the Bible. Invented in 1146 in the Paris Cathedral School of Notre Dame. And that's where they had invented the purgatory. The purgatory is the place where all the souls now had to go to be cleansed before going to heaven. And we're all sinners, so we all have to go there. Not a very pleasant place to be, but it was possible to go to the church, pay the priest a certain amount of money, he would read you a mass, take your confession, and this would save you time in the purgatory. The more money, the longer the time, and over the years, the centuries, the church took a lot of advantage of the fear of the people, what would happen to their souls after their death, and so even the system was modified a few times depending on the need for money. One of the greediest popes, for example, was Pope Sixtus IV. We know him from the Sixtine Chapel. He always needed cash for his vast family, for his army, for his territorial achievements. He was a great patron of the arts as well. So, for example, he even made it possible to even buy indulgence in advance. So if you were planning a big sin, it was possible to have it forgiven before you committed it. He also made it possible to get already deceased relatives out of the purgatory even after their demise by the payment of money. So in the end, nobody had to go to the purgatory at all, just a question of money. And a system of questionable morale that was indeed very fiercely criticized by Martin Luther. That was one of his main criticisms, main reasons for Reformation. And so the ideas of Luther had reached most parts of Germany by the middle of the 16th century. And in 1560, indulgence had broken down as a business, and Cologne Cathedral was broke. No more money from that side, and tastes had also changed. Gothic style was now out of fashion, and so they just left it standing, half complete. The choir was complete, this part here already in use as a church since 1322, The long nave was half completed, and one of the spires, up to a height of 150 feet, a third of the actual size, and the distinctive mark of Cologne from 1560 on was a huge wooden construction crane standing on top of the uncompleted tower. And this crane was also supposed to be a reminder: one day we're going to have to continue, one day we're going to complete this work. But the crane stayed up there for the next 280 years. Almost 3 centuries, no works, no construction going on. Nobody really believed it would ever happen. But then came the 19th century, and with the 19th century came a new fashion called Romanticism. And Romantics once again loved the Middle Ages. Gothic style. Private houses were built in Gothic and medieval style again, like castles. Old castles, monasteries, cathedrals became fashionable once again. A lot of romantic novels were written, like for example The Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's also about a cathedral. And so this cathedral as well became popular once again. People donated private money for it. One romantic was the Prussian king himself. He also gave money from the government. And so in 1842 the second cornerstone was placed, another 38 years followed, and then it was completed in 1880 after 632 years. The worst times were still to come, of course. Second World War. In fact, it's considered quite a miracle that the cathedral is still standing. If you see old photographs of Cologne in 45, the only thing still standing, seemingly undamaged, at least from a distance, was in fact the cathedral. It was hit 14 times directly during the entire war by heavy bombs. 5 of the vaults had collapsed, the northern lateral nave,